There's a rage burning inside you that you've never acknowledged. It sits beneath your polite smile, your reasonable responses, your endless patience with people who don't deserve it. You've been taught that anger is ugly, destructive, inappropriate, something civilized people don't express. So you swallow it, suppress it, smile through it. But that suppressed fury isn't disappearing, it's metastasizing. Every time you bite your tongue when someone disrespects you, every moment you force a smile when you want to scream, every instance you choose peace over honesty, you're feeding a psychological monster that grows stronger in the darkness. You think you're being mature, controlled, spiritually evolved, but you're actually committing a form of emotional suicide that's slowly destroying you from the inside out. Sigmund Freud understood something about human psychology that modern society desperately wants to deny. Suppressed emotions don't simply vanish. They transform into something far more dangerous. That anger you refuse to feel becomes depression. That rage you won't express becomes anxiety. That fury you won't acknowledge becomes physical illness, relationship destruction, and psychological breakdown. This isn't about becoming an angry person or losing control. This is about understanding that your refusal to feel and express one of your most fundamental emotions is creating a psychological pressure cooker that will eventually explode in ways you can't predict or control. The very strategy you're using to maintain harmony is guaranteeing chaos. The most dangerous lie you've been told is that suppressing anger makes you a better person. The truth is far more disturbing. Every time you swallow your rage, you hand another piece of your power over to the people and situations that are slowly killing your spirit. Your niceness isn't virtue, it's psychological violence against yourself. Anger suppression doesn't begin with a conscious choice to deny your feelings. It starts with a survival strategy learned in childhood, when expressing anger felt dangerous, unacceptable, or likely to result in punishment, abandonment, or shame. You discovered early that your rage threatened the adults around you, so you learned to push it down, lock it away, and present a more acceptable version of yourself to the world. The architecture of emotional suppression is built on a foundation of early conditioning that teaches you certain emotions are inherently wrong, destructive, or evidence of moral failing. You absorbed messages that anger was selfish, that fury was sinful, that rage was a loss of control that good people simply don't experience. So you developed sophisticated internal mechanisms to detect and eliminate these feelings before they could surface. Consider how this conditioning operates in your current life. You feel the first stirrings of irritation when someone cuts you off in traffic, but immediately suppress it with thoughts about their possible emergency or bad day. You notice anger rising when a colleague takes credit for your work, but quickly redirect that energy into being understanding about their insecurity. You feel fury when someone consistently disrespects your boundaries, but transform it into concern for their well-being. This suppression creates what psychologists call emotional splitting. You divide your emotions into acceptable and unacceptable categories, allowing yourself to feel only the emotions that maintain your image as a good, kind, reasonable person. But emotions don't actually disappear when you refuse to acknowledge them. They go underground, where they begin to influence your behavior, health, and relationships in ways you don't recognize. The suppression mechanism operates through what clinical research calls cognitive reframing. You become so skilled at reinterpreting situations that you lose the ability to feel angry, even when anger is the appropriate response. Someone betrays your trust, and you focus on understanding their perspective. Someone exploits your kindness, and you concentrate on their need for boundaries. Someone systematically disrespects you, and you work to see their point of view. This reframing feels like emotional maturity, but it's actually emotional avoidance that prevents you from recognizing when you're being mistreated, taken advantage of, or harmed. You become so good at seeing everyone else's side that you forget you have a side worth protecting. Your ability to empathize becomes a weapon used against your own well-being. Watch how anger suppression affects your decision-making process. You don't leave relationships that consistently hurt you because you've suppressed the anger that would motivate you to protect yourself. You don't set firm boundaries at work because you've buried the fury that would give you the energy to advocate for your needs. You don't stand up to family members who consistently disrespect you because you've trained yourself not to feel the rage that would inspire you to demand better treatment. The most insidious aspect of anger suppression is how it disconnects you from your own power. Anger, when felt and expressed appropriately, is the emotion that helps you recognize when something is wrong, motivates you to protect yourself, and gives you the energy to create necessary changes. When you suppress this emotion, you become passive, powerless, and perpetually victimized by situations you have the capability to change. But perhaps most tragically, anger suppression teaches you to betray yourself repeatedly. Every time you smile when you want to scream, every moment you act understanding when you feel outraged, every instance you choose peace over truth, you send a message to your psyche that your authentic feelings don't matter. You become your own worst enemy, consistently choosing others' comfort over your own emotional reality. The body keeps a detailed record of every suppressed emotion, and anger leaves particularly deep marks. The rage you won't feel gets stored in your muscles as tension, in your digestive system as chronic problems, in your immune system as increased vulnerability to illness. Your body becomes the repository for all the fury you refuse to acknowledge, and it begins to break down under the weight of emotions that were meant to be felt and released. When anger has nowhere to go, it doesn't simply disappear. It turns inward, creating what Sigmund Freud identified as one of the most dangerous psychological dynamics: the transformation of outward-directed energy into self-directed destruction. The rage you won't express toward others becomes rage expressed toward yourself, manifesting as depression, anxiety, self-sabotage, and a persistent sense that you're somehow fundamentally flawed. The pressure cooker effect occurs because emotional energy is, by its nature, dynamic and demanding expression. When you block the natural outward flow of anger, that energy must find another outlet. Since it can't be directed toward the external source of your frustration, it redirects toward the only available target, you. The fury meant to protect you from others becomes fury that attacks your sense of self-worth, your confidence, and your right to exist peacefully in the world. This inward-directed anger manifests in countless subtle and not-so-subtle ways. You become your own harshest critic, attacking yourself with a viciousness you would never direct toward others. You engage in self-sabotaging behaviors that undermine your success, health, or relationships. You develop a persistent sense of guilt and shame that seems to have no clear source but colors every aspect of your experience. Watch how suppressed anger transforms into self-attack in your daily life. When someone treats you poorly and you suppress your natural angry response, you often end up questioning what you did wrong rather than recognizing their behavior as inappropriate. When you feel frustrated by a situation but won't allow yourself to feel that frustration, you begin to criticize yourself for being too sensitive, too demanding, or too difficult to please. The pressure cooker effect also creates what psychologists call learned helplessness, a psychological state where you believe you have no power to change your circumstances because you've suppressed the very emotion that would motivate you to take action. Anger provides the energy needed to create boundaries, leave harmful situations, and advocate for your needs. Without access to this emotion, you remain trapped in circumstances that continue to harm you. Clinical research reveals that chronic anger suppression often leads to what appears to be depression, but is actually frozen rage. A psychological state where your natural aggressive energy has been turned so completely inward that you lose access to motivation, joy, and forward momentum. You feel stuck, hopeless, and exhausted, not because you lack energy, but because all your energy is being used to contain the emotions you refuse to feel. The suppression also creates what Freud called displacement, the unconscious redirection of emotional energy toward inappropriate targets. The anger you won't express toward your demanding boss gets displaced onto your family. The fury you won't feel toward your manipulative friend gets redirected toward yourself. The rage you won't acknowledge toward systemic injustices gets channeled into obsessive worry about minor problems you can control. This displacement effect means that suppressed anger rarely stays suppressed. It leaks out in unexpected ways that often damage the relationships and situations you most want to protect. You become irritable about minor issues while remaining passive about major problems. You explode over trivial matters while accepting serious mistreatment with apparent calm. Your emotional responses become completely disconnected from their appropriate triggers. The psychological pressure builds because each act of suppression requires more energy than the last. Like a dam holding back an increasingly large reservoir, your psychological defenses must work harder and harder to contain the growing accumulation of unfelt fury. Eventually, something has to give. Either the dam breaks in an uncontrolled explosion, or the constant pressure begins to erode your psychological foundation from within. But here's what makes this dynamic particularly insidious. The more you suppress anger, the more afraid of it you become. Each successful suppression reinforces the belief that anger is dangerous and must be avoided at all costs. You develop such an aversion to your own aggressive feelings that even slight irritation triggers intense anxiety about losing control. The emotion that should protect you becomes the emotion you most fear. Your body was not designed to contain the level of emotional energy that chronic anger suppression creates. When you consistently refuse to express anger, you're forcing your physiological systems to absorb and process emotional toxins that were meant to be released through appropriate expression. The result is systematic physical breakdown that often gets misdiagnosed as unrelated health problems. Alexander Lowen, whose work on bioenergetics revealed the connection between emotional suppression and physical illness, understood that anger suppression creates what he called energetic blocks, areas in the body where natural energy flow becomes restricted, leading to muscle tension, organ dysfunction, and systemic breakdown. Watch how anger suppression manifests in your physical experience. The tension in your jaw from all the words you didn't say. The knot in your stomach from all the feelings you didn't express. The pain in your shoulders from carrying burdens that aren't yours to carry. Your body becomes a museum of suppressed emotional experiences. The cardiovascular system bears a particularly heavy burden from anger suppression. Research shows that people who consistently suppress anger have higher rates of heart disease, hypertension, and stroke. The fury you won't express gets trapped in your circulatory system, creating chronic elevation in blood pressure and stress hormones. Your digestive system also becomes a casualty of emotional suppression. The gut, often called the second brain, is incredibly sensitive to emotional states. Suppressed anger disrupts digestive processes, leading to conditions like irritable bowel syndrome and chronic stomach problems that resist conventional treatment. The immune system suffers devastating consequences from chronic anger suppression. The constant internal stress depletes your body's ability to fight off infections and heal from injuries. People who suppress anger consistently often find themselves getting sick more frequently and developing mysterious health problems that have no clear physical cause. But perhaps most disturbing is how anger suppression affects your hormonal system. The chronic stress disrupts cortisol, adrenaline, and other stress hormones, leading to problems with metabolism, reproductive health, and overall energy levels. Your body begins operating in constant emergency response, slowly wearing down systems designed for occasional stress, not chronic emotional suppression. If you're starting to recognize the physical toll that anger suppression has taken on your body, if you're seeing connections between your health problems and your emotional patterns, subscribe now. Because what comes next reveals something even more disturbing. how your suppressed anger systematically destroys your ability to form authentic relationships. Suppressed anger doesn't just damage your individual psychology and physical health, it systematically destroys your capacity for authentic relationships by making genuine intimacy impossible. When you refuse to express anger appropriately, you cannot be fully known by others, cannot establish healthy boundaries, and cannot create relationships based on mutual respect. The relationship destruction begins with emotional inauthenticity. When you consistently suppress anger, others sense that you're not being genuine, even if they can't articulate why. People have an unconscious ability to detect when someone is withholding significant emotions, creating unease and emotional distance that undermines intimate connection. Consider how anger suppression affects your closest relationships. You never let your partner know when their behavior genuinely bothers you, so they continue harmful patterns while believing everything is fine. You don't express frustration with friends when they violate your boundaries, so they learn to take advantage of your apparent infinite patience. Alice Miller, whose work on family dynamics revealed how anger suppression perpetuates dysfunction, understood that relationships without honest anger expression become relationships without authentic respect. When people know they can harm you without facing your anger, they lose respect for you as someone capable of self-protection. The suppression also creates resentment accumulation. Because you don't express anger when appropriate, those feelings accumulate over time, creating a growing reservoir of unexpressed hostility that eventually poisons relationships. You remain calm through months of boundary violations, then explode over something minor. The explosion damages the relationship far more than appropriate anger expression would have. Anger suppression prevents you from accessing the protective aspects of anger that help create positive changes in relationships. You don't ask for what you need because you suppress the frustration that would motivate self-advocacy. You don't leave harmful relationships because you suppress the anger that would give you protective energy. Perhaps most tragically, anger suppression teaches people in your life that your feelings don't matter. When you consistently hide anger to protect others' comfort, you train them to believe their emotional states are more important than yours. You create relationships where everyone else's feelings are carefully considered, while yours are ignored or dismissed as unimportant. The journey from anger suppression to emotional authenticity isn't about becoming an angry person. It's about reclaiming your right to feel and express one of your most fundamental emotions in ways that serve your well-being and relationships. This transformation requires unlearning years of conditioning that taught you anger was dangerous. The process begins with emotional validation, giving yourself permission to feel angry without immediately judging or suppressing that anger. This means recognizing that anger, like all emotions, is information about your relationship with the world and whether your needs, boundaries, or values are being respected. Practical anger expression skills include learning to set boundaries with emotional intensity that matches the boundary violation, expressing frustration in the moment rather than accumulating resentment, and using anger's energy to motivate necessary changes rather than attacking others. The transformation involves challenging the beliefs that created anger suppression in the first place. This means recognizing that appropriate anger expression actually improves relationships by creating honesty and respect. It means understanding that anger can coexist with love and compassion rather than canceling them out. Perhaps most importantly, reclaiming your anger requires recognizing it as an essential aspect of your life force and personal power. Anger provides the energy needed to create boundaries, motivate changes, and protect what you value. Without access to this emotion, you remain powerless in situations that require strength and vulnerable to treatment that should be challenged. The ultimate goal isn't to become more aggressive, but to become more authentic, more powerful, and more capable of creating relationships and circumstances that truly serve your well-being. When you can feel and express anger appropriately, you become someone who can be truly intimate because you hide nothing, truly respected because you protect your boundaries, and truly effective because you have access to the full range of human emotional energy. That rage you've been swallowing, that fury you've been hiding, that anger you've been transforming into something more acceptable, it's been trying to save your life. Every suppressed moment of anger was your psyche's attempt to alert you that something was wrong, something needed to change, something required your attention and action. But instead of listening to this crucial information, you've been systematically silencing the very emotion that could set you free. Sigmund Freud's dark warning wasn't just clinical observation, it was prophecy. He saw that suppressing natural emotions creates individuals who turn their life force inward, becoming their own worst enemies while appearing to be models of social acceptability. The person who cannot feel anger, cannot protect themselves, cannot create necessary boundaries, and cannot access the power needed to build an authentic life. Your suppressed anger isn't just personal, it's evidence of a system that profits from your compliance. Every moment you swallow your rage, you enable treatment you would never accept for someone you love. Every time you smile through disrespect, you teach others that your boundaries don't matter. Every instance you choose peace over truth, you sacrifice your authentic self on the altar of others' comfort. But here's what your anger has been trying to tell you. You matter. Your boundaries matter. Your needs matter. The fire you've been containing is meant to burn through everything that's been holding you back. It's meant to incinerate every relationship that requires your diminishment, every situation that demands your silence, every pattern that feeds on your self-betrayal. The people who benefit from your anger suppression don't want you to watch this. They need you to keep swallowing your rage so they can continue treating you in ways they would never accept for themselves. Your awakening threatens their convenience. Your boundaries challenge their entitlement. Your authentic emotions disrupt their control. Right now, someone reading this feels their suppressed anger stirring. They're recognizing the cost of their emotional suppression in their failing health, their hollow relationships, their powerless life. They're tired of being their own worst enemy, while everyone else benefits from their self-destruction. They're ready to stop performing peace and start demanding respect. If that's you, if you feel your rage awakening as you read these words, if something inside you is screaming enough to the patterns that have been slowly killing you, then understand this. Your anger is not the problem. Your suppression of it is. Your fury is not your enemy, it's your liberator waiting to be unleashed. The revolution starts when you stop swallowing fire and start breathing it. But reclaiming your anger is just the beginning of discovering how many emotions you've been denied, how much of your authentic self you've been forced to hide. There's an entire emotional vocabulary you've never been allowed to speak, a complete range of human experience that's been systematically suppressed. Subscribe now if you're ready to stop being emotionally controlled and start being emotionally free, because what comes next will expose every emotion they've taught you to suppress, every feeling they've convinced you is dangerous, every authentic response they've trained you to hide. The full spectrum of your emotional power is waiting to be reclaimed. Hit that subscribe button and join the emotional rebellion. Because in a world that profits from your suppression, feeling everything fully is the most radical act of liberation you can commit. Your complete emotional freedom depends on what you do next. Don't let them keep you emotionally imprisoned. Subscribe and set yourself free.